Well, good Saturday morning, friends. Mark Holmes here with my buddy Cowboy Joe Boo, as well as Joe Bear in the house. And as always, I want to say thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as you ladies, you know that this literally does not work. So let's get over for business here and let's wake up the football gods. Hope everybody is ready to have the weekend. We have football, XFL. That's right, we have XFL Saturday and Sunday. We'll be checking them out, seeing what's what and who's who. I don't know if we'll do a live stream or not, but tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, we do have our Sunday afternoon Zoom calls. If you are a channel member, you can be part of the conversation. Okay, so right now we have teams that are beginning the bloodletting. They're beginning to let go some of the guys that were disappointing, guys that they have replacements for, guys that are deemed too expensive. Some teams are evaluating where they are. They look at themselves as potentially a Super Bowl team, or do they look at a team that needs to be torn down and rebuilt? And one of those teams that seem to be thinking right now about tearing down and rebuilding is the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams have already let go of Bobby Wagner. There's rumors that they'd be interested in trading Jalen Ramsey. Clearly, they're trying to create some cap space. They're trying to get draft picks and stuff. They're trying to reload for another run, recognizing that the team has gotten old. They've ended up losing a lot of their free agents like Ndamukong Suh, who, was basically a hired assassin, and Von Millers and Odell Beckham Jr.'s, and they realize that we need more and we need to start over with young talent. There's no shame in the game. They won the Super Bowl, the season before. And that is the way of it. You can look at a team like Arizona right now who are talking about possibly maybe moving on from DeAndre Hopkins, get more draft capital because their quarterback probably won't be ready to start the season because of the ACL. And understanding that what we just went through with Michael Gallup and understanding how much Kyler Murray's movement is a part of his game, that ACL, we hope that it's not going to end up being like a RG3 type of a deal where RG3 was never the same after the ACL injury because his game was predicated on him being able to get outside and being able to use his legs. So we'll have to wait and see. But that may be another team that are sellers that are firestorming the team. Fire selling, excuse me. Enter the Cowboys. Bobby Wagner. I wanted to go back because I don't really need to do a video again about Bobby Wagner. Because, see, the Cowboys were interested in Bobby Wagner last year. Catboy ended up lowballing Bobby Wagner. We got to make him fit. The interesting thing is, if we look at the salary cap and everything else, the Joneses are selling us, a bridge in Arizona. They're bullshitting us because they tell you can't do this, you can't do that. It's amazing because, see, the Eagles started off in worse cap shape than we did last year and were able to sign their guys and to sign everybody else and end up the year with more cap space. It's really on how you use the tools available. The Cowboys will tell you that the tools aren't there and that they can't do these things. But here's the thing that's interesting, because when you hear a contract number, 5 years, $50 million, which is what Bobby Wagner signed, it's not actually the case. There's voidable years. It's really how much guaranteed money is it? So what the Rams did last year was they signed with that 5-year, $50 million contract. But the first year, the cap number was only $2.5 million. Now, the cap number for this year was going to be $12.5 million. It's a bigger hit. But because they got in on the low side, that they said, we'll go ahead and make that number bigger next year. And they incurred $7.5 million in dead money. It's not ideal, but basically they got his services for $10 million for 1 year, which is basically what the deal was worth, $10 million a year. And if you look at it and say 140 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 6 sacks, they actually got their money's worth. Now, here's where it's really interesting, because technically Had they kept him for this year, it would have been an even better bargain. You're like, what? Now think about this. $2.5 million plus $12.5 million. That's $15 million for 2 seasons. If they had waited till the end of this year to cut him and cut him after the season, it would have only been a $3 million cap hit. But they recognize that Bobby Wagner wants to go someplace and win, have a chance at that Super Bowl, and we need the cap relief, even though it's only $5 million as a pre-June 1st cut. We don't know if it's going to be, they could be making him a post-June 1st cut for all we know. I don't know, in which case that would probably save him a little bit more or spread it out over the 2 years. But looking back at this, we're basically saying Bobby Wagner for last year and this year would have cost $7.5 million a year. That's a lot more palatable than when you hear $10 million a year, especially when you look at the first year being 2.5. Dan Quinn was talking to Bobby Wagner. Dan Quinn was trying to work it out. I want to go back to a video in April of last year. My hair was longer, and I had my older desk that was there. And, man, I'm looking at my old desk right there, and I'm happy that with my new one right now because it's really a lot better. But let's listen into Mark Holmes, a guy from his basement, reporting. Here's where, and what I pointed out was, they've been lying to us about, we can't afford this guy and we can't afford that. And I went through and I showed the cap number for guys this year. I took Bobby Wagner's cap number for this year. I took Von Miller's and I took Zavarius Smith's cap numbers. And if you take their cap number for this year, it comes out to $10.9 million. Roscoe. Which is the exact number that we're franchise tagging Dalton Schultz. We always say that guys won't want to come here. Why would they want to come here? Dealing with the Joneses and things like that. And, Stephen Jones, who's got that smug look and tries to, like he's the smartest guy in the room, he's the oil cat, rich guy and everything else. But I'm sorry, they're just dumb as can be. They're dumb. So Bobby Wagner confirmed, shout out to everybody that let me know that Fish had put a video up about this. And, this is spreading like wildfire here. But Bobby Wagner had a real interest in coming with the Cowboys. As he put it, that was a real thing. We had conversations. You don't have a conversation about, going out with somebody unless you want to go out with them. You don't go up and say, hey, would you like to go out to dinner? Unless you actually want to go out to dinner. So they had real talks. The problem is the Cowboys looked and said, nah, $8.5 million, that's just too much. And here we go with the pattern of the Joneses, okay? Keeping up with the Joneses, it's crazy. You'll remember everybody that the Cowboys, when they try and negotiate with, they lowball. They give numbers that aren't even realistic. They went to J. Ron Curse and basically said, how about $1 million a year? How about that? There you go. We know you had the best safety play we've had in like 12 years or more. But how about $1.5 million for you? Dude, what? Are you serious? D-Law, we know that if we cut you, we'll get a $19 million cap hit. How about we just tear up your contract and we give you a 1-year deal for $10 million? Full release me. Are you kidding me? So you go from that number to, okay, how about $35 million guaranteed? Why would you even put out a number of $10 million for a 1-year deal if you could actually go to 35? Are we supposed to take you serious? Is your whole thing of saying we can't afford the punter or we can't afford somebody, a way that you think that people are going to come back and say, well, I feel bad. I know you don't have much money, so I'll just sign dirt cheap. I'll just, I'll work for free. I feel bad that you had to settle for a 300-foot yacht as opposed to, an aircraft carrier. Let's look at Bobby Wagner's contract.
Shall
for
we?
a moment here. Because the thing that happens to people is they don't understand the dynamics and the workings of an NFL contract, okay? What you hear is, and what they put out, of course, is the total possible number for the contract. So you hear things like, Bobby Wagner's contract, 5-year, $50 million contract. And you say, man, well, yeah, I guess we couldn't afford that. Who's going to pay that kind of money for Bobby Wagner? Well, that's not that's the possibility of it, but that number will never happen. Very rarely does anybody actually go through a whole contract the way it's actually stated. Pat Mahomes will not do that $450 million. It may end up being more. They may end up redoing it at some point and changing it, or it may be that he never reaches that full potential. But that's the numbers that are baked into the equation. And now there's the new tool, which is voidable years, where you just kind of add a couple of years on there to basically smooth out the guaranteed money, because the only thing that really matters is the guaranteed money that you're going to get. And that's where the Cowboys basically try to put in a little thing that said, you know what, that guaranteed money isn't really guaranteed if we deem it not to be. And that's where my man walked. You know what? I can pass the Dutchie from the left-hand side without having to worry about a mother humping thing. And here it is. You want to put things in my clause that basically say I can retroactively lose my money. So Bobby Wagner's cap hit, FYI, as I pointed out this morning, is $2.5 million this year. His base salary is $1.5 million. His signing bonus is $1 million. That's what counts for this year. Next year, his cap number is $7.5 million. I'm sorry, it's $12 million. So when you look at that, you could say $12 million, $3.5 million, it's $7.5 million. Bobby Wagner only wanted $8.5 million. The Dallas Cowboys said, no, that's too much. That was chump change. I have to be honest. That's chump change in today's salary cap. And with the tools that you have, that's really was a low risk contract. It really was. And for those that say, well, he slowed down, they're trying to make excuses why we screwed up. I really hope, I would love to see Bobby Wagner get 180 tackles this year. How about that? I would love for him to be in the conversation of the MVP. So we can look back next year and say, damn, the Joneses penny pinching really was a big mistake. They screwed the pooch when they had a guy who actually wanted to come here and actually at a reasonable price. And they decided, we don't need him.
Yeah. I can't remember for sure if that $8.5 million was what he was looking for last year. But when you start looking at that, had we signed him for $8.5 million a year, where he wanted to come here, and you look at that as $17 million for 2 seasons, and versus the money that we spent $2 million for Anthony Barr, and had the Cowboys done some work, creative work with it to keep that first year low, it would have been really a prudent move last year. It would have saved them money. They would have had a linebacker in there. Now, here's the reality. The reality is, will the Cowboys continue to do business the way they've been doing? Right now, as we sit here today, we have Leighton Vander Esch is a free agent. Luke Gifford is a free agent, more of a special team standout, and Anthony Barr are free agents. We're talking about a guy with 140 sacks. And let's just say hypothetically,
let's just say hypothetically, had the Cowboys signed Bobby Wagner to the 5-year, $50 million contract that the Rams did last year, which I'm not saying we should have, but just hypothetically, his cap number last year was $2.5 million. That's only $500,000 more than what we played for Anthony Barr. And the difference being is Bobby Wagner did not have an ACL injury and would be unable to work out until deep into training camp. He would have been healthy. He would have been on the team throughout OTAs. He would have been with the team throughout mini camps. He would have been there teaching the team, the players, guys like Damone Clark, guys like Jabril Cox, the intricacies of this defense from a player's point of view who has been there and thrived in it. This was a huge mistake by the Cowboys. Again, a huge mistake. Now, we'll see if they continue to do the same thing. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say that Bobby Wagner is probably going downhill. He probably is at 33 years of age. However, we're talking about a guy who hasn't had catastrophic injuries, a guy who takes care of his body in one of the most important positions on the defense. We'll see what happens. I just feel kind of like I can't believe we're here again with the same situation. Now, one other final thing before we get out of here. I love the revisionist history. We have gone through all offseason so far and trashed Dak Prescott for interceptions. Somehow, Derek Carr, who had every weapon available, some of the best in the business, and failed. Somehow, this guy is a first ballot Hall of Famer and a better option than Lamar Jackson.
In a way that Daniel Jones has rarely shown. I mean, Lamar Jackson won an entire season's MVP for a reason. He was a difference maker from start to finish, from his 5-touchdown game that year in Miami to start the season to all the way to the end. Jones has only shown flashes of that, and unfortunately for the Vikings, it flashed on the wrong day this year for him. And he's a runner and he's a thrower like Lamar as well. I would say. I mean, he's fast, but he's no Lamar in terms of difference making for his organization and being an MVP for an entire year. I would just counsel against the Jets. Why would they trade multiple draft choices for a guy, first rounders too? Because again, the Ravens are going to franchise tag him if they don't come up with a long-term deal, and that's coming next week at the Combine as well. News will be a-poppin' next week because general managers and coaches are all there, most of them, and most of them speak. And when Harbaugh speaks, will the percentage of Lamar staying in Baltimore be less than 200%, which is the last percentage we heard out of John Harbaugh's mouth about Lamar being the starter there? Will the general manager, Eric DaCosta, talk about, we're talking right now, and we're, leave it at that? And, will there be another full-throated, we love Lamar, can't imagine a world without him? That's coming next week. Mm-hmm. And so when they place the franchise tag upon him, or as we say in the business, when somebody does not wish to have it placed upon him, it's slapped on them. Mm-hmm. When they slap the franchise tag on Lamar Jackson, if I'm Baltimore, I put the franchise tag on him, the non-exclusive. I put him in the non-exclusive. I put him on that because you can let him then, they say, hey, if you don't take our offer, then go ahead. We love you so much. We'll let you seek out one that you like. But you have to seek it out with a team that's got 2 first-rounders in the next 2 drafts, 2023 and 2024, because if we do decide to let you go and we're willing to love you so much that you go see the market out there, Lamar. You go seek it out. You go find a team that's got the next 2 first-round draft choices that's willing to have a conversation with you. And if that's a contract that's too rich for our blood, no offense, it's just a business decision by you and us. You can go, and we'll take the 2 first-round selections. Would you as a team do that with a guy who has not finished the last 2 seasons? That is a very difficult position for somebody who's hitting that market on a non-exclusive tag. That's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough one for someone to swallow. 2 straight years didn't finish. DNF. So I'm just saying, if I am the Jets, why would you do that when Derek Carr is sitting there and he's a different quarterback? I know he's not a former MVP. He doesn't run, and he's not a dual threat. But the one thing that he has that Lamar doesn't have is he doesn't come with the tag that requires you cough up 2 first-rounders. Would you do that and pay him a contract that he wants? As much as I love the guy and I love what I've seen out of him, what set off my spidey sense about what I heard in Baltimore, how the season finished, I'm not doing that. I am not doing that.
Then what are the Jets waiting for?
I don't know. Rodgers?
Well,
now that he's out of the dark in Oregon?
Give up assets.
I don't know.
To get him. Assets you suddenly now don't have for him this year or next year.
I don't know. I have no idea if the owner of the New York Jets is putting his thumb on the scale. You know? I do not know. Another thing. Hey, Robert Saleh's at the podium next week. Joe Douglas next week. Like, let's roll.
Oh. Do the Jets have a new quarterback by this time next week?
I don't think so. But, man, it's going to be on next week. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel.
We'll see what the Jets do, and we'll see what the NFL does. We are 1 week into free agency. Not free agency, in tagging players. Thus far, nobody's been tagged just yet. Nobody's in a rush to do it because they know they have another week in a couple of days, and they don't want to be the first one to get the blowback from the players. With that being said, I appreciate each and every one of you guys, as well as you ladies, and we'll have more on the Bobby Wagner situation.
Our folks here, and as always, I want to thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report.
You did one hell of a job, and the only thing else I got to say is